Eleanor Blackwood stepped off the dusty stagecoach in 1867 Kansas, her face hidden behind a thick veil that concealed a terrible secreta scar that branded her as damaged goods in the eyes of society. When her new husband, James Crawford, gently reached to lift the veil on their wedding day, she whispered desperately, "Don't lift it. I'm a mistake." But what he discovered beneath would either destroy their chance at love forever, or prove that some marks tell stories of courage rather than shame. What happens when a man sees the truth that a woman believes makes her unworthy of love? The stagecoach hit another bump, and Eleanor Blackwood's hand flew to her face to keep the heavy veil from shifting. Through the dusty window, she could see nothing but endless prairie stretching toward the horizon, like a golden ocean. Kansas in July 1867 was hotter than anything she had ever felt back in Boston. "Next stop, Redemption Creek," the driver hollered from his perch above. Eleanor's stomach twisted into knots. After 3 days of traveling, she was finally going to meet the man who had answered her advertisement. The man who thought he was getting a proper lady for a wife. If only he knew what really sat beneath his veil. The coach slowed, and dust swirled around them like a tornado. Through her veil, Eleanor watched the small town come into view. Wooden buildings lined a single dirt road. A few horses stood tied to posts, their tails swishing at flies. Men in dusty clothes and wide hats moved about their business. This was nothing like the fancy brick buildings and clean streets of Boston. But then again, Boston had stopped feeling like home the day Marcus Devlin destroyed her life. "Ma'am?" The driver had climbed down and was looking at her through the open door. "This is your stop." Eleanor took a deep breath and stepped down from the coach. The heat hit her like a wall. Her thick veil stuck to her skin, making it hard to breathe. But she dared not remove it. Not here. Not ever. "Your trunk, miss?" She nodded toward the wooden box that held everything she owned. Well, everything she was willing to claim anymore. Her fingers found the silver locket at her throat. Inside was the only picture she had left of her parents. They had died when she was 12, leaving her to live with her aunt in Boston. Now, even that life was gone. A tall figure stepped out from the shade of the general store. Even from a distance, Eleanor could see he was built like a man who worked with his hands. His shoulders were broad under a worn leather vest. His walk was confident but not cocky. This had to be James Crawford, the rancher who had written such kind letters, the man who had asked for no picture of her face, the man who had said he wanted to build something real together. If he only knew what he was really getting. "Miss Blackwood?" The man removed his hat, showing brown hair that curled at his collar. His face was tanned from working in the sun, with lines around his eyes from squinting at distant horizons. Those eyes were green like spring grass after rain. "Mr. Crawford." Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. The veil muffled her words. "Thank you for meeting me." He looked at her for a long moment. She felt his gaze even through the thick fabric covering her face. "That's quite a veil for such a hot day. Must be mighty uncomfortable." Eleanor's hand shot to her throat. "I prefer to keep it on, if you don't mind, until we know each other better." Something moved across his face. Maybe curiosity, maybe worry. But he just nodded and reached for her trunk. "Of course. My wagon's right over there. The ranch is about an hour away." As they walked through town, Eleanor noticed people staring. A woman stopped sweeping her porch to watch them pass. 2 men outside the saloon stopped talking to look. A veiled woman was strange enough, but everyone knew about mail-order brides. They were the talk of any small town. "Don't worry about them," James said quietly as he helped her into the wagon. "Folks here mind their own business mostly. They'll find something else to whisper about soon enough." But even as he spoke, Eleanor's blood turned to ice. There, leaning against the saloon wall, was a face she recognized. Marcus Devlin, the man who had ruined her life, the man she had traveled halfway across the country to escape. What was he doing in Kansas? Their eyes met across the dusty street. His smile was cold and sharp. He touched the brim of his hat in a mock salute. Eleanor's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. "You all right?" James asked, noticing her sudden stillness. "Yes," she lied. just tired from traveling. But she wasn't all right, not at all. Marcus being here could only mean one thing. He had followed her, and if he was here, her secrets wouldn't stay hidden much longer. James clicked his tongue, and the horses started moving. As they rolled out of town, Eleanor kept looking back. Marcus was still there, still watching, still smiling that terrible smile. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. James's whole face lit up. "It's not much yet, but it's got good bones. My father started it back in the 40s. We lost it during the war when things got hard. But I managed to buy it back last spring. Still rebuilding, but the land is good. Water runs year-round. Grass grows thick." As he talked, Eleanor tried to listen, but her mind kept drifting back to Marcus. Why was he here? What did he want? She had already paid the price for standing up to him. The scar hidden beneath her veil proved that. "I should warn you about something," James continued. "There's been trouble lately. Cattle rustlers hitting the smaller ranches. And there's talk of the railroad coming through. That's got some folks stirred up about land prices and such." Eleanor nodded, though she barely heard him. Her own troubles seemed much bigger than cattle thieves or railroad talk. "I hope you'll like it," James said. "The house isn't fancy, but it's solid. Mrs. Henderson keeps house for me. She's a good woman. Lost her husband in the war, and I give her work and a place to stay." "That's kind of you," Eleanor managed. "We take care of our own out here. That's how it has to be when the nearest neighbor is miles away." The wagon rolled on through the afternoon heat. James pointed out landmarks along the way. A creek where good water could always be found. A hill where wildflowers bloomed in spring. A grove of trees that gave shade to cattle in summer. Eleanor tried to pay attention, but Marcus's face kept floating through her mind. In Boston, he had been a respected businessman. Everyone thought he was charming and successful. No one knew about the money he stole from his business partners. No one knew how he planned to blame it on an innocent man with a family. No one, except Eleanor. She had found the letters in his desk when she was looking for paper to write a thank you note. Letters that proved everything. Letters that showed Marcus was a thief and a liar. When she confronted him, he had laughed. Said no one would believe her word against his. Said she should mind her own business and marry him like a good girl. But Eleanor couldn't let an innocent man take the blame for Marcus's crimes. So she took the letters. That's when Marcus showed his true face. That's when he heated up a branding iron and marked her cheek with the letter T for thief. That's when he spread rumors all over Boston that she had stolen from him. He never said what she had stolen, but he made sure everyone knew she was a criminal. In one night, Eleanor went from being a respectable lady to being damaged goods. No decent family would receive her. No proper man would court her. She was ruined. "There it is," James said, pulling her from her dark thoughts. Eleanor looked up to see a valley spread out before them. Green fields stretched toward distant hills. A 2-story house sat in a grove of cottonwood trees. Barns and other buildings dotted the landscape. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures. It was beautiful. More beautiful than anything she had expected. "It's wonderful," she breathed. James's chest puffed with pride. "Like I said, it's not fancy, but it's home." As they rolled up to the house, a plump woman came out onto the porch. Her gray hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her apron was clean despite the day's work. "This must be Mrs. Henderson," James said. "She's been looking forward to meeting you." Eleanor's heart sank. Another person to lie to. Another person who would eventually learn the truth about what she really was. The woman bustled down from the porch with a warm smile. "You must be Miss Blackwood. Welcome to Crawford Ranch. I'm Martha Henderson, but you just call me Martha." "Thank you," Eleanor said through her veil. "You're very kind." Martha's eyes lingered on the veil, but she didn't ask questions. "You must be tired after that long journey. Come inside where it's cooler. I've got fresh bread and cold milk waiting." The house was simple but comfortable. Clean wooden floors, handmade furniture, curtains at the windows. It felt like a real home, not like the cold mansion where Eleanor had lived with her aunt in Boston. "I put you in the front bedroom," Martha said, leading the way upstairs. "It gets the morning sun, which is nice in winter. There's a basin and pitcher for washing, and clean towels on the chair." Eleanor looked around the small room. A narrow bed with a colorful quilt, a simple dresser with a mirror, a window that looked out over the valley. It wasn't much, but it felt safe. "Thank you," she said. "It's perfect." Martha smiled. "Dinner's at 6. Nothing fancy, just good food. Mr. Crawford likes to eat early so he can get back to work before dark." When Martha left, Eleanor sat on the bed and finally lifted her veil. In the mirror across the room, she could see her reflection. The right side of her face was unmarked and might even be called pretty. But the left side bore the raised, angry scar that Marcus had burned there with his branding iron. The letter T was clear as the day he made it. Thief, that's what he had branded her. That's what he wanted everyone to see when they looked at her. Eleanor pulled the veil back down. She couldn't hide forever, but she could hide for now, at least until she figured out what Marcus was doing in Kansas. Through her window, she could see James working with his horses in the corral below. He moved with easy confidence, talking quietly to the animals. He seemed like a good man, a kind man. But even good men had limits, and Eleanor was about to test every one of them. Dinner that first night was awkward. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with her veil still in place, trying to eat soup through the gauze without making a mess. James and Martha made polite conversation about the ranch and the weather, but she could feel their curiosity like heat from a fire. "The cattle are looking good this year," James said, cutting his beef into neat pieces. "Should be a profitable drive come fall." "That's wonderful," Eleanor replied, though she had no idea what a cattle drive was. "You ever been around livestock, Miss Blackwood?" Martha asked. Eleanor shook her head. "I lived in the city. My aunt had a small garden, but that was all." "Well, you'll learn quick enough. Ranch life has its own rhythm. Up before dawn, work until dusk, but there's satisfaction in it, building something with your own hands." After dinner, James suggested they sit on the porch where it was cooler. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Crickets chirped in the grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "It's so quiet," Eleanor said. "In Boston, there was always noise. Carriages on the streets, people talking, church bells ringing." "Do you miss it?" James asked. Eleanor thought about that. Did she miss the fancy dresses and elaborate dinners, the theater and museums, or did she miss the feeling of belonging somewhere? "I miss feeling safe," she said finally. James leaned forward in his chair. "You're safe here, Eleanor. Whatever brought you west, whatever you're running from, it can't touch you on Crawford land." If only that were true. But Marcus's presence in town proved that nowhere was really safe, not for someone like her. "Tell me about your family," James said. "Your letters mentioned you were raised by an aunt." Eleanor's fingers found her locket. "My parents died when I was 12. Yellow fever. My aunt took me in, but she wasn't warm. She did her duty, but she never let me forget I was a burden." "I'm sorry, that must have been hard." "What about your family?" Eleanor asked, wanting to change the subject. James's face grew thoughtful. "My parents built this place from nothing. Pa fought in the Mexican War, came back with stories of wide-open spaces and land for the taking. Ma followed him anywhere he wanted to go. They worked side by side for 20 years, building something lasting. What happened to them? Cholera took them both when I was 19. Then the war came, and I had to sell the ranch to pay debts. Spent 4 years fighting for the Union, came back to nothing. But I never stopped dreaming of getting this place back." Eleanor heard the pain in his voice. "It must have been terrible, losing everything." "It was, but I learned something important. Material things can be lost, but the skills and determination that built them can't be taken away. As long as you have those, you can start over anywhere." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. For just a moment, she could almost believe that this might work, that she might find happiness here. But then she remembered Marcus's cold smile, and the peace shattered. The next morning, Eleanor woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing. Through her window, she could see James already at work in the barn. Martha was in the kitchen, making coffee and frying eggs. "Morning, dear," Martha said when Eleanor came downstairs. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you." Eleanor kept her veil in place even for breakfast. "Mr. Crawford had to ride out to check the north pasture. Said he'd be back by noon. Thought maybe you and I could work in the garden this morning. Get you used to ranch life." Eleanor spent the morning learning to tell weeds from vegetables. The work was harder than she expected, but satisfying in a way that fancy needlework had never been. Martha was patient and kind, sharing stories about the other ranchers' wives and the challenges of frontier life. "Takes a special kind of woman to make it out here," Martha said as they picked tomatoes. "City ladies sometimes think it'll be romantic, living on a ranch. But it's hard work from sunup to sundown. No servants to do the cooking and cleaning, no fancy shops for pretty dresses." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Eleanor said, and realized she meant it. "Good, because Mr. Crawford needs a partner, not a decoration. He's a good man, but he's got big dreams. This ranch could be something special with the right woman beside him." That afternoon, James returned with news that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "Ran into Sheriff Morrison in town," he said over lunch. "Seems there's a stranger asking questions. Well-dressed fellow from back east. Says he's looking for someone." Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. "What kind of questions?" "About newcomers, especially ladies traveling alone. Sheriff thought it was odd enough to mention." Martha frowned. "What business would an Easterner have with our neighbors?" "Don't know," James said, but his eyes were on Eleanor. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Eleanor's mind raced. She had to tell him something, but how much? There was a man on the train. He seemed interested in my travels. I thought I had lost him in Kansas City. "Interested how?" James's voice had gone hard. "He was persistent in his attentions. When I made it clear I wasn't interested, he became unpleasant. It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either." James's jaw tightened. "You think he followed you here?" "I don't know. Maybe." "Well, if he shows up here, he'll get a different kind of welcome than he's expecting." James pushed back from the table. "I've got work to do." "But Eleanor, if this man is bothering you, I need to know. We take care of our own here." After he left, Martha studied Eleanor with sharp eyes. "There's more to this story, isn't there, dear?" Eleanor's throat felt tight. Some stories are better left untold. Maybe. But secrets have a way of coming out eventually, usually at the worst possible time. That evening, Eleanor couldn't sit still. She paced the porch, jumped at every sound, and found herself constantly touching her veil to make sure it was in place. "You're wound tighter than a spring," James observed. "This fellow from the train really has you spooked." "You don't understand," Eleanor said. "He's not just some man with romantic notions. He's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Eleanor turned away. How could she explain without revealing everything? "He has a temper, and he doesn't like being told no." James moved to stand behind her. She could feel his warmth, smell the scent of leather and honest sweat. "Eleanor, I meant what I said. You're under my protection now. Whatever this man wants, whatever hold he thinks he has on you, it ends here." Eleanor wanted to believe him, but James didn't know what he was up against. Marcus Devlin was wealthy, powerful, and utterly ruthless. He had branded her face for defying him. What would he do to a simple rancher who got in his way? "You should know," she said quietly, "that marrying me might bring you trouble." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Eleanor, we all carry baggage from our past. The question isn't whether you have problems. The question is whether you're brave enough to face them. And if I'm not, then we'll face them together." His words wrapped around her heart like a warm blanket. But even as she felt herself falling for this good, honest man, Eleanor knew the truth. Some problems were too big for two people to handle. Some mistakes couldn't be fixed. And some secrets, once revealed, destroyed everything they touched. As they stood together on the porch, watching the last light fade from the western sky, Eleanor made a silent promise. She would find a way to deal with Marcus herself. She wouldn't let her past destroy James's future, even if it meant sacrificing her own chance at happiness. Because that's what love was, wasn't it? protecting the people you cared about, even from yourself. The gunshot cracked through the morning air like thunder, sending Eleanor's coffee cup crashing to the kitchen floor. Through the window, she watched James sprint toward the barn, where smoke was beginning to curl up from the hayloft. "Fire!" Martha shouted, already grabbing buckets from the back porch. "Eleanor, pump water, fast as you can!" Eleanor's hands shook as she worked the pump handle. This couldn't be an accident. Not with Marcus in town. Not when everything had been going so well for the past week. James emerged from the barn leading a frightened horse, his face black with soot. "It's not too bad yet, but we need every hand we can get." Ranch hands came running from all directions. They formed a bucket line from the well to the barn, passing water hand over hand in a desperate race against the flames. Eleanor found herself in the middle of the line, her fancy dress soaking wet, her veil clinging to her face. "How did it start?" Martha puffed, hefting another bucket. "Rifle shot through the window," James called back. "Hit a kerosene lamp." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Someone had done this on purpose. Someone who wanted to hurt James. Someone who knew exactly how to get her attention. After an hour of hard fighting, they managed to put out the fire. The damage wasn't terrible, but it could have been much worse. James stood in the charred barn, examining the bullet hole in the wooden wall. "This came from the ridge," he said, pointing toward the hills. "Good spot for shooting. Hard to see from here." Sheriff Morrison arrived an hour later, a thin man with a gray mustache and tired eyes. He examined the bullet hole and asked questions about enemies and grudges. "Anyone new in the area?" he asked James. "Just my bride-to-be," James replied. "But she's been here a week. This doesn't concern her." Eleanor bit her tongue. She wanted to tell the truth, but how could she explain without revealing everything? How could she admit that Marcus had probably done this to send her a message? "Well, keep your eyes open," the sheriff said. "Could be rustlers trying to scare you off good grazing land. Could be someone with a personal grudge. Either way, they mean business." That evening, Eleanor couldn't eat supper. She sat at the table, moving food around her plate while James and Martha discussed hiring extra hands to watch the ranch. "I don't like it," Martha said. "First cattle rustlers, now someone shooting at the barn. This valley used to be peaceful." "Times are changing," James replied. "Railroads coming. Land prices going up. Some folks don't like change." But Eleanor knew this had nothing to do with railroads or land prices. This was Marcus playing with her, like a cat playing with a mouse before the kill. After Martha went to bed, Eleanor and James sat on the porch in heavy silence. The night sound seemed different now. Every rustle in the grass made Eleanor jump. Every shadow looked like it might hide an enemy. "You're scared," James observed. "Aren't you?" "Some, but not the way you are. You're not just worried about another attack, you're terrified of something specific." Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself. "What if I told you that marrying me was the worst mistake you could make? I'd say that's my choice to make. What if I told you that I've brought danger to your door, that everything bad happening here is my fault?" James turned to face her. Even in the darkness, she could feel his eyes searching her veiled face. "Then I'd say it's time you told me the whole truth." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to tell him everything. About Marcus and the stolen money and the letters hidden in her locket. About the branding iron and the scar, and the reason she could never remove her veil. But where would she start? And how could she make him understand that she had tried to do the right thing, only to have it destroy her life? "Some truths are too heavy to share," she whispered. "And some burdens are too heavy to carry alone." Before Eleanor could respond, a new voice cut through the darkness. "How touching." Marcus Devlin stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the porch, a pistol gleaming in his hand. He looked exactly the same as he had in Boston, perfectly dressed, perfectly groomed, perfectly cold. James shot to his feet, but Marcus waved the gun in his direction. "I wouldn't, if I were you. Sit back down and keep your hands where I can see them." "What do you want?" James demanded. Marcus smiled, that terrible smile Eleanor remembered so well. "I want what belongs to me. Eleanor stole something from me back in Boston, and I've come to collect it." "I don't know what you're talking about," Eleanor said, though her voice shook. "Oh, I think you do. Those letters you took from my desk. The ones you used to ruin my reputation. Where are they? James looked confused. Letters? What letters? Marcus laughed. She hasn't told you, has she? Your precious bride is a thief. She broke into my home and stole private documents. Then she ran away west, like the coward she is. That's not true, Eleanor said, but her voice was barely a whisper. Isn't it? Show him your face, Eleanor. Show him what thieves get in civilized society. Eleanor's hands flew to her veil. No. Show him, or I'll shoot him right now. James started forward. You son of a… Marcus swung the gun toward James. One more step and this conversation ends very badly for you. Eleanor felt the world spinning around her. Everything was falling apart. All her careful plans, all her hopes for a new life, crumbling like dust. The letters, Marcus continued. Where are they? I don't have them anymore, Eleanor lied. I don't believe you. Search her, Crawford. Check her belongings. Go to hell, James said flatly. Marcus's face went dark. Fine. We'll do this the hard way. He raised the pistol toward James's chest. Wait, Eleanor cried. I'll give you what you want. Just don't hurt him. Eleanor. No, James said. Don't give this man anything. But Eleanor was already reaching for the chain around her neck. Inside her locket were copies of the letters that proved Marcus's crimes. She had made them before leaving Boston, knowing she might need proof of his guilt. Marcus watched greedily as she opened the locket and pulled out the tiny folded papers. Clever girl, he said. I knew you were too smart to travel without insurance. As Eleanor handed over the papers, Marcus grabbed her wrist. His fingers dug into her skin like claws. Did you really think you could escape me? He hissed. Did you think I'd let you ruin my life and just walk away? Let her go, James said, his voice deadly quiet. Marcus ignored him. You cost me everything, Eleanor. My business, my reputation, my future wife, all because you couldn't mind your own business. You were going to let an innocent man take the blame for your crimes, Eleanor said, finding her courage. I couldn't let that happen. And look where your noble intentions got you. Marcus's free hand moved toward her veil. Shall we show your intended what his bride really looks like? Don't, Eleanor pleaded. But Marcus was already pulling at the fabric. Eleanor struggled, but his grip was too strong. The veil slipped, then fell completely away. In the moonlight, Eleanor's scar was clearly visible. The raised, angry letter, T, that Marcus had burned into her cheek with a branding iron. The mark that labeled her as a thief for all the world to see. James sucked in a sharp breath. Marcus smiled triumphantly. There she is, your beautiful bride, marked like the criminal she is. Eleanor wanted to run, wanted to disappear into the night and never face the disgust she was sure she would see in James's eyes. Instead, she forced herself to look at him. What she saw there wasn't disgust. It was rage. Pure, burning rage directed at Marcus. You did that to her, James said. It wasn't a question. She's a thief. This is what thieves get. James moved so fast that Marcus barely had time to swing the gun around. But James was a rancher, used to handling dangerous animals and quick reflexes. He knocked the pistol aside and drove his fist into Marcus's jaw. Marcus went down hard, the gun flying into the darkness. Before he could recover, James was on top of him, his hands around Marcus's throat. James, stop, Eleanor cried. You'll kill him. That's the idea, James growled. But Eleanor grabbed his arm. No, he's not worth it. He's not worth making you a killer. James looked up at her, his face twisted with fury. He branded you, like an animal. I know, but killing him won't change that. Slowly, James released his grip. Marcus gasped and coughed, clutching his throat. Get off my land, James said. If I see you here again, I won't be so merciful. Marcus struggled to his feet, his perfect clothes torn and dirty. This isn't over, he wheezed. I have those letters now, but I want more. I want her to pay for what she cost me. Then you'll have to go through me, James said. Marcus looked between them, his eyes full of hate. We'll see about that. He disappeared into the darkness, leaving Eleanor and James alone on the porch. Eleanor quickly picked up her fallen veil and started to put it back on, but James caught her hands. "Don't," he said softly. "Please don't hide from me anymore." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You've seen what I am, what he made me. I've seen what he did to you. That's not the same thing as what you are. I'm branded, marked. No decent man would want." James cupped her face gently, his thumb tracing the scar. "You're brave. You risked everything to protect an innocent person. That scar doesn't make you less. It makes you more." Eleanor broke down then, all the fear and shame and loneliness pouring out in great gasping sobs. James held her while she cried, his strong arms making her feel safe for the first time in months. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought this to your door." "You didn't bring anything. He followed you. There's a difference. But now he has the letters, the proof of his crimes." James was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "Does he?" Eleanor looked at him in confusion. "What do you mean? I mean, are you sure those were the only copies you made?" A slow smile spread across Eleanor's face. "You're very smart, Mr. Crawford. And you're very thorough, Miss Blackwood. I had a feeling a woman smart enough to uncover his crimes would be smart enough to cover her tracks." Eleanor laughed, despite everything. "There are copies in 3 different banks, and with a newspaper editor in Chicago, and with a federal marshal in Kansas City. Then Mr. Devlin is going to be very unhappy when he discovers what he stole tonight wasn't nearly as valuable as he thought." They sat together on the porch swing, Eleanor's head on James's shoulder. The night sounds had returned to normal. Even the danger felt manageable now that her secret was out. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "Now we plan a wedding," James said. "Unless you've changed your mind about wanting to marry a simple rancher." Eleanor lifted her head to look at him. "Are you sure? Even knowing everything? Even with all the danger?" James kissed her forehead right over the scar. "Especially knowing everything. You're the strongest woman I've ever met. I'd be honored to call you my wife." Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Real, honest hope for the future. But even as she smiled, she knew Marcus wasn't finished with them. Men like him didn't give up easily, and next time he wouldn't underestimate them. Next time, he would come prepared for war. 3 days after Marcus's midnight visit, Eleanor was hanging laundry when she heard riders approaching fast. She dropped the wet sheet back into the basket and shaded her eyes against the morning sun. 5 men on horseback were thundering toward the ranch house, kicking up clouds of dust. James appeared from the barn, rifle in hand. His face was grim as he recognized the lead rider. Marcus Devlin sat his horse like a king, flanked by 4 rough-looking men with guns on their hips. But something was different about Marcus now. Gone was the perfectly groomed gentleman from Boston. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and his eyes held a wild light that made Eleanor's stomach clench with fear. "Crawford," Marcus called out. "I want to talk." "Then talk," James replied, not lowering his rifle. "But keep your distance." Marcus urged his horse closer, ignoring the warning. "I've had 3 days to think about our last conversation. 3 days to realize what you cost me." Eleanor moved toward the house, but Marcus swung his pistol in her direction. "Stay right where you are, dear Eleanor. This concerns you too." "What do you want, Devlin?" James demanded. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "What do I want? I want my life back. I want my reputation back. I want everything your thieving bride stole from me." "She didn't steal anything. She exposed your crimes." "Crimes!" Marcus's voice rose to a near shriek. "I was a respected businessman. I had a future, a position in society, and she destroyed it all with her meddling." Eleanor could see that Marcus had lost his grip on reality. The man who had once been coldly calculating was now consumed with rage and desperation. "Those copies she made," Marcus continued, "they've been sent to every important person in Boston. My business partners have thrown me out. My fiancé broke our engagement. I'm ruined." "Good," James said flatly. Marcus's face turned purple with fury. "You think this is over? You think you can steal my woman and my future and just ride off into the sunset?" "Your woman?" Eleanor found her voice. I was never your woman. I was your victim. You were mine, Marcus screamed. I chose you. I was going to marry you, give you everything. You branded me like cattle, because you betrayed me, because you chose some stranger over your own betrothed. Eleanor stared at him in shock. Betrothed? Marcus, I never agreed to marry you. You assumed I would, but I never said yes. You didn't have to say yes. It was understood. Your aunt approved the match. My aunt wanted your money. I wanted nothing to do with you. James stepped forward, putting himself between Eleanor and Marcus's gun. You heard her. She doesn't want you. She never wanted you. Time to accept that and move on. Marcus's wild laughter echoed across the ranch yard. Move on? There is no moving on. She ruined everything. She has to pay. One of Marcus's hired men shifted nervously in his saddle. Boss, maybe we should. Shut up, Marcus snarled. I'm paying you to follow orders, not think. Eleanor could see the situation spinning out of control. Marcus was beyond reason, and his men looked like the kind who would do anything for money. What do you want? She called out. Tell me what you want, and maybe we can work something out. James shot her a warning look, but Eleanor ignored it. Someone had to try to defuse this before people got killed. Marcus's eyes gleamed. I want you to come with me, back to Boston. You'll stand trial for theft and clear my name. There won't be any trial, James said. She's not going anywhere with you. Then she'll die here, Marcus said simply, along with anyone who tries to protect her. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Eleanor felt the weight of them settling on her shoulders. This was all her fault. James and Martha and the ranch hands were in danger because of her choices. If I come with you, she said slowly, will you leave these people alone? Eleanor, no, James said sharply. Will you? She pressed. Marcus considered this. If you come willingly, I'll let your cowboy live, but you'll face justice for what you did to me. What justice? Eleanor demanded. You're the criminal. You stole money from your business partners. Prove it. Eleanor smiled coldly. I already did. Those letters you took from me the other night? They were copies of copies. The real evidence is in safe hands all over the country. Marcus's face went white, then red. You're lying. Am I? Check your coat pocket. With shaking hands, Marcus pulled out the papers he had taken from Eleanor's locket. As he unfolded them, his expression changed from confusion to rage. The papers were blank. You switched them, he whispered. I switched them before you ever got to Kansas, Eleanor said. Did you really think I'd carry the only evidence of your crimes with me? Marcus crumpled the papers in his fist. It doesn't matter. Even without the letters, I can still destroy you. I can tell everyone what you really are. They already know, James said. Eleanor told me everything. About the letters, about the branding, about why she left Boston, and I don't care. You don't care that she's a marked woman? A thief? She's not a thief. She's a hero. She risked everything to protect an innocent man from your schemes. Marcus stared at them both, his mind clearly struggling to process this information. In his twisted thinking, everyone should reject Eleanor the way Boston society had. The fact that James accepted her completely was breaking his brain. This isn't how it's supposed to work, he muttered. She's supposed to be alone, abandoned, friendless. Well, she's not. Martha's voice came from the porch. The housekeeper stood there with a shotgun in her hands. She's got family here. More voices joined in from around the ranch yard. The ranch hands had positioned themselves with rifles and pistols, all pointed at Marcus and his men. Seems like you're outnumbered, James observed. Marcus looked around wildly, finally realizing his situation. But instead of backing down, his desperation made him more dangerous. If I can't have her, he snarled, then no one can. He swung his pistol toward Eleanor, but James was already moving. The rifle shot cracked across the yard, and Marcus's gun flew from his hand as blood bloomed across his shoulder. Next one goes through your heart, James promised. Marcus clutched his wounded arm, his face twisted with pain and fury. This isn't over, he gasped. I'll be back. I'll find a way to make you both pay. No, Eleanor said quietly. You won't. She walked toward Marcus's horse, her chin held high despite the scar on her face. You want to know why you lost, Marcus? It's not because I'm smarter than you, though I am. It's not because I'm braver than you, though I am. It's because you never understood what you were fighting. I was fighting a thief, Marcus spat. You were fighting love, Eleanor replied. Real love. The kind that sees everything and chooses to stay anyway. The kind that makes people stronger, not weaker. She gestured toward James and Martha and the ranch hands. These people don't care about my scar. They don't care about Boston gossip. They care about who I am right now, today, in this moment. Marcus stared at her with hatred. Pretty words won't change what you are. You're right, Eleanor said. I am exactly what I am. A woman who chose to do the right thing, even when it cost her everything. A woman who found people worth loving and being loved by. A woman who isn't ashamed of her scars anymore. She turned to face James. I love you, she said simply. Not because you saved me, but because you saw me, all of me, and you chose to stay. James smiled. I love you too, scars and all. Marcus made a choking sound of rage and disbelief. This is impossible. It's not natural. It's not right. What's not right? Sheriff Morrison's voice cut through the tension. Is you threatening innocent people? The sheriff had arrived with a deputy, both men armed and ready for trouble. They had been watching from the ridge, waiting to see how things played out. Marcus Devlin, the sheriff continued, you're under arrest for arson, assault, and making threats, and I've got a telegraph here from Boston. Seems there's a federal warrant out for your arrest on charges of embezzlement and fraud. As the sheriff and his deputy took Marcus and his men into custody, Eleanor felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. It was finally over. The man who had haunted her nightmares was going to face justice at last. But even as relief flooded through her, she knew the real victory wasn't Marcus's arrest. It was the family she had found here on this remote Kansas ranch. It was the love that had grown between her and James, despite everything Marcus had tried to do to stop it. So, James said, putting his arm around her waist, think you're ready to marry a simple rancher? Eleanor leaned into his warmth. I think I'm ready for anything, as long as you're beside me. As they watched Marcus being led away in chains, Eleanor touched her scar one last time. Tomorrow she would stand at the altar without a veil, her face open to the world. She would speak vows of love and partnership with a man who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. She was no longer Eleanor Blackwood, the mysterious mail-order bride. She was no longer Eleanor Whitmore, the ruined woman of Boston. She was simply Eleanor, beloved and loving, scarred but not broken, ready to build a new life with new people, who understood that sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the darkest soil. The past was finally behind her. The future stretched ahead like the endless Kansas prairie, full of possibility and hope. Eleanor's hands shook as she watched the jailhouse doors slam shut behind Marcus, but not from fear anymore, from pure, burning anger that had been building for months. Sheriff Morrison turned to face her and James, his weathered face serious under the brim of his hat. Ma'am, I need you to come to town tomorrow and give your statement about what happened in Boston, he said. The federal marshal will want to hear your side of things. Eleanor nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Through the jailhouse window, she could see Marcus pacing his cell like a caged animal. Even behind bars, his presence made her skin crawl. There's something else, the sheriff continued. Marcus's men started talking once they realized they weren't getting paid. Seems he promised them a lot more than money if they helped him get you back to Boston. James's jaw tightened. What kind of promises? The kind that would have made you disappear permanent-like. And your housekeeper, too, if she got in the way. Eleanor felt sick. He was going to kill you? All of us, the sheriff confirmed. Good thing you folks were ready for trouble. As they walked back to the wagon, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Marcus had given up too easily. In all the months she had known him, he had never backed down from a fight without having another plan ready. You're thinking too hard, James said, helping her into the wagon seat. Marcus isn't finished. I know him. He's planning something. He's in jail, Eleanor. Even if he escapes, every lawman in 3 states will be looking for him. But Eleanor's worry only grew stronger as they rode home. The sun was setting, painting the sky deep red like spilled blood. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, and the sound made her shiver despite the warm evening air. At the ranch, Martha had prepared a celebration dinner. "Figured we should mark the occasion," she said, setting out her best dishes. "Not every day we see justice done proper-like." The ranch hands joined them on the porch for the meal. They laughed and told stories, relieved that the danger was over. But Eleanor picked at her food, unable to join the celebration. "Something's bothering you," Martha observed quietly. "I keep thinking about what the sheriff said, about Marcus planning to make James disappear. That's not the Marcus I knew in Boston." "People change when they're desperate," Martha said, "especially men who think the world owes them something. Or maybe I never knew him at all." After dinner, James walked Eleanor to the creek that ran behind the house. The water gurgled softly over smooth stones, and fireflies danced in the tall grass. It should have been peaceful, but Eleanor felt like a storm was brewing. "Talk to me," James said, sitting on a fallen log. "What's really troubling you?" Eleanor sat beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. In Boston, Marcus was cold and calculating. He never lost his temper, never acted without thinking. But today, he seemed wild, desperate, like a completely different person. Maybe facing consequences for the first time in his life broke something in him. Or maybe he was acting. Maybe he wanted us to think he was out of control. James considered this. What would be the point? I don't know. But Marcus never does anything without a reason. And he's very, very good at making people underestimate him. A twig snapped in the darkness beyond the creek. Both Eleanor and James froze, listening. Nothing moved except the water and the night insects. "Probably just a deer," James said, but his hand had moved to the pistol on his hip. They walked back to the house in silence, both of them scanning the shadows. At the porch steps, Eleanor stopped. "James, what if we're wrong about this being over? Then we'll deal with whatever comes next, together." That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out over the ranch yard. Everything seemed normal, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Around midnight, she saw movement near the barn, a shadow that didn't belong. She was about to call out when the shadow moved again, and she realized it was just one of the ranch hands making his rounds. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. The next morning brought troubling news. Sheriff Morrison rode out to the ranch before dawn, his face grim. "Marcus escaped," he said without greeting. "Sometime during the night. His cell door was unlocked from the outside." Eleanor's blood turned to ice. How is that possible? Someone helped him. Someone who knew the jailhouse layout. "My deputy was found knocked unconscious in the back room." James was already moving toward the barn. "How long has he been gone?" "Could be anywhere from 2 to 6 hours. I've got men searching, but he could be halfway to Colorado by now." "Or he could be right here," Eleanor said quietly. Both men looked at her. "What do you mean?" the sheriff asked. "Marcus doesn't run from fights. He plans them. If he escaped, it's because he has something specific in mind." As if her words had summoned him, a rifle shot cracked across the morning air. The bullet splintered the porch railing inches from where Eleanor stood. "Get down!" James shouted, tackling Eleanor to the ground. From the ridge overlooking the ranch, Marcus's voice carried clearly. "Did you miss me, darling?" Another shot. This one shattered a window in the house. Martha's scream came from inside. "Martha!" Eleanor tried to get up, but James held her down. "She's all right," he said, "just scared." "What do you want, Devlin?" James called out. "I want what I've always wanted. Eleanor. And since she won't come willingly, I'll just have to take her." More shots rang out. The ranch hands scrambled for cover behind the barn and the water trough. Sheriff Morrison crouched behind his horse, trying to get a bead on Marcus's position. "He's got the high ground," the sheriff muttered. "Could pick us off one by one from up there." "Not if we split up," James said. "Circle around behind him." "That'll take time. And he's got a clear shot at anyone who moves." Eleanor realized with growing horror that Marcus had planned this perfectly. The ridge gave him a commanding view of the entire ranch. He could keep them pinned down for hours while he picked his shots. "There has to be another way," she said. "There is." James's voice was deadly calm. "I go up there and end this." "James, no. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to sit here and let him hunt us like animals." Another shot. This one came close enough that Eleanor felt the wind from the bullet. Marcus was toying with them, showing off his marksmanship. "I'm getting tired of waiting," Marcus called. "Send Eleanor up here, or I start killing people." To prove his point, he put a bullet through the water trough. The ranch hands dove for new cover as water poured across the yard. "He means it," Sheriff Morrison said. "That man's past caring about consequences." Eleanor made a decision that terrified her, but someone had to end this, and Marcus would never stop as long as she was hiding behind other people. "I'm going up there," she said. "Like hell you are," James replied. "He won't shoot me. Not right away. He wants to gloat first, to make me suffer. That'll give you time to get into position." "Eleanor, no, I won't let you. You can't stop me." Eleanor was already moving, staying low but heading for the path that led up the ridge. "This is my fight. It always has been." She heard James cursing behind her, but she didn't look back. Marcus had destroyed enough lives. He had cost enough people their peace and safety. It was time to face him on her own terms. "That's my girl." Marcus's voice was full of sick pleasure as he watched her climb toward him, finally ready to accept your fate. Eleanor kept climbing, her heart pounding but her steps steady. Behind her, she could hear James and the sheriff moving into position. They would get one chance at this, and she had to give them that chance, even if it cost her everything. Eleanor reached the top of the ridge to find Marcus waiting for her with a smile that chilled her blood. His rifle pointed directly at her heart, while the morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky ground. "There's my beautiful bride," he said, his voice sickeningly sweet. "Though I notice you're not wearing your veil anymore. Decided to show the world that lovely scar I gave you?" Eleanor kept her hands visible and her voice steady. "What do you want, Marcus?" "What I've always wanted. You, back where you belong, under my control." "I was never under your control. That was your mistake." Marcus laughed, but there was madness in the sound. "Wasn't I? You lived in the house I chose, wore the clothes I bought, ate the food I provided. How is that not control?" "That was my aunt's house, my aunt's choices. I never agreed to any of it. Your aunt knew what was best for you, just like I do." Eleanor took a careful step closer. From this angle, she could see James making his way up the back side of the ridge. She needed to keep Marcus talking. "Tell me something, Marcus. Did you really love me? Or was I just another thing you wanted to own?" Marcus's eyes glittered with an emotion she couldn't name. "Love? What does love matter? I chose you. That should have been enough." "But it wasn't enough, was it? Because I chose someone else." The rifle shook in Marcus's hands. "You chose a nobody, a dirt farmer, a man with nothing to offer you. He offered me something you never could." "What? Poverty? Hard work? A life of drudgery?" Eleanor smiled. "Freedom. The freedom to be myself, to make my own choices, to love and be loved for who I really am." "Who you really are is a thief and a troublemaker. Who I really am is a woman who stands up for what's right, even when it costs her everything." Behind Marcus, Eleanor could see James getting into position, but she needed Marcus to turn around, to give James a clear shot without risking her own life. "You know what I realized, Marcus? You never asked me what I wanted. Not once. You just assumed I would fall in line with your plans. I gave you everything. A home, security, a place in society. You gave me a cage with pretty bars, but it was still a cage." Marcus's face was turning red with fury. "I could have made you happy." "No, you couldn't, because you don't know what happiness is. You only know what possession is." "I possess you now," Marcus screamed, swinging the rifle toward her, "and if I can't have you, no one can." But as he pulled the trigger, Eleanor threw herself sideways. The bullet whistled past her ear and struck the rocks behind her. Before Marcus could fire again, James's shot rang out from behind him. Marcus spun around, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers, but he still held the rifle in his other hand. "You," he snarled at James. "This is all your fault. She was mine until you came along." "She was never yours," James said, keeping his own rifle trained on Marcus. "She's not property to be owned. Everything is property. Everything has a price, and I paid for her." "With what? Stolen money? Money you took from innocent people?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. Those fools never would have missed it if she hadn't meddled. Those fools had families to feed, dreams to chase. You stole their futures. I was building an empire. I could have given Eleanor anything she wanted. She didn't want an empire built on lies, James said. She wanted honesty, truth, things you don't understand. Eleanor picked herself up from the rocky ground, her dress torn but her spirit intact. "It's over, Marcus. Even if you kill us both, the truth is already out there. The whole world knows what you really are." Marcus looked between them, his eyes wild with desperation. No, this isn't how it ends. I don't lose. I never lose." "You lost the day you decided other people existed for your benefit," Eleanor said. "You lost the day you thought you could buy love with threats and violence. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing but pain and fear. James gave me what you never could. He gave me choice, respect, love that doesn't come with conditions." Marcus raised the rifle again, but his wounded arm shook too badly to aim properly. "If that's love, then love is weakness." "No," Eleanor said, walking toward him despite the gun pointed at her chest. "Love is strength. Love is what makes people risk everything for each other. Love is what brought me here, to this moment, facing you without fear. You should be afraid of me. I was afraid of you for months. You haunted my dreams and poisoned my thoughts, but I'm not afraid anymore." Eleanor was close enough now to reach out and touch the rifle barrel. "Do you know why? Because you're stupid. Because I finally understand what you never did. My worth doesn't come from what you think of me. It comes from what I think of myself, and from the people who choose to love me despite my flaws." Marcus stared at her, confusion replacing the madness in his eyes. "That doesn't make sense." "It doesn't make sense to you because you've never experienced real love. You've only known possession and control. But real love sees everything, the good and the bad, and chooses to stay anyway." Behind Marcus, Sheriff Morrison had climbed up the ridge with 2 deputies. They had Marcus surrounded, but Eleanor held up her hand to stop them. "Marcus," she said gently, "it's over. Put down the gun. Let them help you." "Help me?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "I'm ruined, finished. Everything I worked for is gone." "Then build something new, something honest this time." "With what? I have nothing left." "You have your life. That's more than you've given other people." Marcus looked at the rifle in his hands as if seeing it for the first time. "I never meant for it to go this far." "I know, but it did go this far. And now you have to face the consequences." Slowly, Marcus lowered the rifle. His shoulders sagged as the fight went out of him. "I loved you, you know, in my own way." Eleanor felt a wave of sadness for the man he might have been if he had made different choices. "I know you thought you did. But love isn't about taking. It's about giving." Sheriff Morrison stepped forward and carefully took the rifle from Marcus's hands. "Marcus Devlin, you're under arrest. Again." As they led Marcus away in chains, he looked back at Eleanor one last time. "Do you really think you'll be happy with him?" Eleanor smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "I already am." After Marcus was gone, Eleanor and James stood together on the ridge, looking out over the valley that would be their home. The sun was fully up now, burning away the shadows and revealing the beauty of the land spread out below them. "So," James said, putting his arm around her waist, "how does it feel to be free?" Eleanor leaned into his warmth. "Terrifying. Wonderful. Like I could do anything." "What do you want to do first?" Eleanor thought about that. For so long, her life had been shaped by fear and other people's expectations. Now, for the first time, she could choose her own path. "I want to help other women like me, women who are trapped by men like Marcus. I want them to know there's another way." James smiled. "I think that's a fine idea. How do we start? By showing them it's possible. By building something real and lasting here. By proving that love is stronger than fear. As they walked back down the ridge together, Eleanor felt the last of her old life falling away like a shed skin. She was no longer the frightened woman who had arrived in Kansas wearing a veil of shame. She was Eleanor Crawford, partner to a good man, protector of the innocent, and living proof that sometimes the best thing you can do is refuse to be what others try to make you. The scar on her face would always be there, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it told a story of survival, of courage, of a woman who chose to do right even when it cost her everything. And that was a story worth telling. Eleanor stood before the cracked mirror in her bedroom, her wedding dress laid out on the bed like fresh snow, when Martha knocked on the door with news that would change everything about this perfect October morning. "There's a woman downstairs," Martha said breathlessly. "Says she rode all night from Dodge City. She's asking for you specifically." Eleanor's heart skipped. "Asking for me? By name?" "Says she heard about what you did to Marcus Devlin. Says she needs help with her own situation." Eleanor looked at her reflection. Today was supposed to be her wedding day. In 2 hours, she would walk down the aisle without a veil, her scar visible to all the neighbors who had come to celebrate. She had planned this moment for weeks. But downstairs was a woman in trouble, a woman who had ridden through the night seeking help. "Tell her I'll be right down," Eleanor said. The woman waiting in the kitchen was young, maybe 20, with dark circles under her eyes and clothes that spoke of hard travel. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and her story made Eleanor's blood boil. "My husband's brother came to stay with us 6 months ago," Sarah explained, her hands shaking around the coffee cup Martha had given her. "At first, he seemed nice enough. But then, he started making demands, saying I owed him things because he was family." Eleanor sat across from her. "What kind of demands?" Sarah's face reddened. "The kind a woman shouldn't have to give. My husband travels for work, selling farm equipment. When he's gone, his brother, he says I have to do what he wants or he'll tell lies about me, make it seem like I'm the one causing trouble." "Where's your husband now?" "Gone to Kansas City for 3 weeks. I locked myself in the root cellar last night when his brother got drunk and tried to break down my bedroom door. That's when I ran." Eleanor felt rage building in her chest. Another Marcus. Another man who thought he could take whatever he wanted from women who had nowhere to turn. "You did the right thing," Eleanor said. "Running was smart. But where can I go? I have no family, no money of my own. And when my husband comes back, his brother will fill his head with lies about me." Martha refilled Sarah's coffee cup. "Seems to me you've got a choice to make, dear. Do you want to go back to that situation? Or do you want to fight?" "Fight? How can I fight? I'm just one woman against 2 men." Eleanor smiled. "You're not alone anymore." James appeared in the kitchen doorway, dressed in his best suit for the wedding. His face darkened when he heard Sarah's story. "We can't let her go back to that," he said simply. "But James, it's our wedding day," Eleanor said. "Everyone's coming. The preacher's already here." James looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Eleanor Crawford, if you think I'd marry a woman who would ignore someone in need just for a party, then you don't know me at all." Eleanor's heart swelled with love for this man. "So what do? We go get her things, and we show her husband's brother what happens to men who hurt women." "But that's 50 miles to Dodge City," Martha said. "You can't make it there and back before dark." "Then we'll stay overnight," James said. "The wedding can wait a day." "Or," Eleanor said slowly, "we can bring the wedding with us." Everyone stared at her. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "I mean the preacher's here. Our friends are here. And love doesn't need a fancy church to make it real. We'll have the ceremony when we get back, after we've dealt with this." James grinned. "I knew there was a reason I wanted to marry you." Within an hour, they had assembled a small army. James, Eleanor, Sheriff Morrison, and 3 ranch hands rode toward Dodge City with Sarah leading the way. The wedding guests decided to stay and wait, turning the planned celebration into a picnic. The ride to Dodge City took most of the day. Sarah's farm was a modest place outside town, with a small house and a few outbuildings. As they approached, they could see smoke rising from the chimney. He's there, Sarah whispered. They dismounted quietly and approached the house. Through the window, they could see a large man drinking whiskey at the kitchen table. Empty bottles littered the floor around his chair. That's him, Sarah said. That's Carl Mitchell. James studied the situation. Eleanor, you and Sarah stay with the horses. Sheriff, you and the boys come with me. Wait, Eleanor said. Let me talk to him first. Eleanor, no. This man is dangerous. So is Marcus. But sometimes talking works better than fighting. Before anyone could stop her, Eleanor walked up to the front door and knocked. Heavy footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal a man who looked like he hadn't washed in days. Who are you? Carl demanded. I'm Eleanor Crawford. I've come to talk to you about Sarah. Carl's eyes narrowed. Sarah's my business. She's family. She's not your wife. She's your brother's wife. And she doesn't belong to you. Carl laughed, but there was no humor in it. Women belong to their families. That's how it works. Sarah knows her place. Her place is not in your bed. Carl's face turned ugly. You don't know what you're talking about, lady. Sarah's been asking for it, teasing me, walking around in her nightgown. Sarah was in her own home, where she should be safe from men like you. Men like me? I'm family. I got rights. You have no rights to another man's wife. No rights to force yourself on any woman. Carl stepped closer, and Eleanor caught the smell of whiskey on his breath. Maybe you need to learn some manners, too. Maybe I should teach you both what women are for. That's when James appeared behind Eleanor, his rifle in his hands. Maybe you should think real carefully about your next words. Carl looked past Eleanor and saw the sheriff and the ranch hands. His drunken confidence wavered. This is my property, he said, but his voice was less sure now. Actually, it's not, Sheriff Morrison said, stepping forward. This property belongs to Sarah's husband. You're just a guest here, and guests who threaten women aren't welcome. You can't throw me out. I'm family. Watch us, James said. What happened next surprised everyone. Carl, faced with real consequences for his actions, broke down completely. He dropped to his knees on the porch and started crying. I didn't mean to be bad, he sobbed. I just get so lonely, and Sarah's so pretty, and my brother has everything I want. Eleanor felt a wave of disgust mixed with pity. Being lonely doesn't give you the right to hurt people. I know I'm wrong, but I can't stop myself. Sheriff Morrison stepped forward. Well, we're going to help you stop. You're going to pack your things and leave this county. If I see you near Sarah or any other woman again, you'll spend the next 10 years in prison. Carl nodded frantically. Yes, sir. I'll go. I'll leave tonight. As Carl stumbled around packing his belongings, Sarah finally came forward. Eleanor expected her to be relieved, but instead, she looked sad. He wasn't always like this, Sarah said quietly. When he first came, he seemed lost, broken. I felt sorry for him. Feeling sorry for someone doesn't mean you have to let them hurt you, Eleanor said. I know, but it's hard when it's family, when you're supposed to care about them. Eleanor understood. She had felt sorry for Marcus too, in the end. Caring about someone doesn't mean accepting their bad behavior. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is refuse to enable them. By evening, Carl was gone, his wagon disappearing down the road toward Kansas. Sarah stood in her kitchen, looking around at the mess he had left behind. What do I tell my husband when he comes back? She asked. The truth, Eleanor said. All of it. If he's a good man, he'll believe you. If he doesn't, then you'll know what kind of man you really married. James appeared in the doorway. We should head back. It's getting dark. But Sarah shook her head. Please, stay the night. All of you. I don't want to be alone here yet. So they stayed. The men bedded down in the barn while Eleanor and Sarah shared the small house. As they sat by the fire, Sarah asked the question Eleanor had been expecting. How did you get so brave? How did you learn to stand up for yourself? Eleanor touched her scar. I learned that being afraid of something gives it power over you. But facing it, even when you're terrified, takes that power away. Were you afraid today? When you confronted Carl? Terrified. But I was more afraid of what would happen if I did nothing. Sarah nodded slowly. I want to be like you. Strong. Brave. You already are, Eleanor said. You ran when you were in danger. You asked for help. You chose to fight instead of giving up. That's the bravest thing of all. As they prepared for bed, Sarah asked one more question. Do you think I'll ever feel safe again? Eleanor smiled. I think safety isn't something that comes from hiding. It comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you. And from having people who will stand beside you when things get tough. People like you? People like all of us. James, Martha, the sheriff, the ranch hands. We're your family now if you want us to be. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I'd like that very much. As Eleanor settled into the small bed, she thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been a frightened woman hiding behind a veil. Now she was someone other women turned to for help and strength. Tomorrow, she would finally marry James. But tonight, she was exactly where she needed to be, helping another woman find her courage. The morning sun painted the prairie gold as Eleanor stood at the altar James had built in their front yard, surrounded by wildflowers and the faces of people who had become her family. But the biggest surprise wasn't the tears of joy in her eyesight, was the letter in James's pocket that would change their future forever. Dearly beloved, Preacher Williams began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of neighbors, ranch hands, and friends. We are gathered here today to witness the joining of James Crawford and Eleanor Blackwood in holy matrimony. Eleanor looked out at the faces watching her. Martha stood in the front row, beaming with pride. Sarah Mitchell was there too, having decided to stay in Kansas and start fresh rather than wait for a husband who might not believe her story. Sheriff Morrison tipped his hat to her, and the ranch hands grinned like proud brothers. But it was James who held her attention. James, who had seen her at her worst and chosen to love her anyway. James, who had fought beside her and trusted her judgment even when it meant changing their wedding plans. James, Preacher Williams said, do you take Eleanor to be your wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, James said, his voice strong and sure. And I promise to see you, Eleanor, all of you, your courage, your kindness, your strength, the things that make you who you are. Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. Eleanor, the preacher continued, do you take James to be your husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, Eleanor replied, and I promise to build something real with you, James, to be your partner in all things, in honesty and in hope. As they exchanged rings, Eleanor caught sight of a familiar figure at the edge of the crowd. For a moment, her heart stopped, thinking it might be Marcus escaped again. But then she realized it was a woman, in a traveling dress, with a veil covering her face. The woman caught Eleanor's eye and nodded slightly before melting back into the crowd of well-wishers. You may kiss the bride, Preacher Williams announced. James lifted Eleanor's chin and kissed her there in front of everyone, his lips gentle on hers, his hands framing her face both sides of it. The crowd cheered, and Eleanor felt a joy so pure it seemed to lift her right off the ground. But even as she smiled and accepted congratulations, her mind kept drifting to the veiled woman. Something about her had seemed familiar, though Eleanor couldn't place what. The celebration continued well into the afternoon. There was dancing and eating and storytelling. Children ran between the tables while their parents shared toasts to the happy couple. Eleanor had never imagined she could feel so surrounded by love and acceptance. As the sun began to set, James pulled her aside. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. A wedding present. Eleanor expected jewelry or perhaps a deed to more land. Instead, James handed her an envelope with her name written in elegant script. It came yesterday, he said. I thought you should read it after the ceremony. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened the letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the words made her gasp. My dear Eleanor, you don't know me, but I know your story. My name is Catherine Whitmore, and I was engaged to Marcus Devlin before you arrived in Boston. When the scandal about his business dealings broke, I realized how close I had come to making a terrible mistake. I have spent the last 6 months investigating Marcus's past. What I found horrified me. You were not his first victim. There were others women he courted, controlled, and ultimately destroyed when they tried to resist him. I am writing to tell you that your courage in exposing him has saved more women than you know. But I am also writing to warn you. Marcus has escaped from prison again. The authorities believe he is heading west. I am coming to Kansas to help catch him once and for all. I have evidence of his other crimes, evidence that will put him away forever. Be careful, be strong, and know that you are not alone in this fight. Your friend, Catherine Whitmore. Eleanor sank onto the porch steps, the letter shaking in her hands. James sat beside her, reading over her shoulder. When was this written? He asked. Eleanor checked the date. 3 days ago. Then she's probably already here. That woman I saw at the edge of the crowd during the ceremony had a veil, Eleanor finished, just like I used to wear. They found Catherine waiting by the barn, her veil now removed, to reveal a face marked by its own scars, not physical ones, but the kind that came from learning hard truths about people you trusted. Eleanor Crawford, Catherine said, extending her hand. I'm honored to meet you. Thank you for your letter, and for coming all this way. Catherine's expression grew serious. I came because Marcus is more dangerous than ever. Prison broke something in his mind. He's no longer just angry, he's obsessed. And obsessed men do unpredictable things. What kind of evidence do you have? James asked. Catherine opened her traveling bag and pulled out a thick folder. Testimonies from 5 other women. Financial records showing a pattern of theft going back years. Medical reports documenting injuries he inflicted. Eleanor felt sick. 5 other women? That we know of. There may be more who were too frightened to come forward. As they talked, Sheriff Morrison approached with 2 of his deputies. Folks, I hate to interrupt the celebration, but we just got word from the territorial marshal. Marcus Devlin was spotted 2 days ago in Wichita. He's got money now, probably. From selling stolen good sand, he's hired more men. How many men? James asked. At least 6, maybe more, and they're well armed. Eleanor felt the familiar knot of fear in her stomach, but this time it was different. This time, she wasn't afraid for herself, she was afraid for everyone she loved. He's coming here, she said. This is where he'll make his stand. Then we'll be ready for him, James said. No, Eleanor shook her head. This ends now. I won't let him threaten innocent people anymore. Catherine stepped forward. What are you thinking? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, an idea forming in her mind. I'm thinking it's time to stop running from Marcus Devlin. Time to face him on my terms, not his. Eleanor, James said warningly, whatever you're planning. I'm not planning anything dangerous. I'm planning something smart. Eleanor turned to Catherine. How would you like to help me catch a criminal? As the last of the wedding guests departed and darkness settled over the ranch, Eleanor, James, and Catherine sat around the kitchen table planning their trap. Martha served coffee and listened with growing alarm to their scheme. It's too risky, Martha said. What if something goes wrong? Something will go wrong, Eleanor replied. That's why we need to plan for every possibility. The plan was simple but dangerous. Catherine would spread word that Eleanor was traveling to Denver to testify in a federal case against Marcus. Eleanor would take the stagecoach, apparently alone and vulnerable. But James and the sheriff would be hidden among the passengers, and more men would be positioned along the route. Marcus won't be able to resist, Eleanor explained. He'll see it as his chance to silence me forever. And what if he doesn't take the bait? James asked. Then we'll try something else. But I know Marcus. His pride won't let him ignore this opportunity. 3 days later, Eleanor climbed aboard the stagecoach bound for Denver, her heart pounding but her resolve steady. She wore a simple traveling dress and carried only a small bag. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman fleeing alone. But hidden in the boot of the coach were James and Sheriff Morrison. 2 deputies rode as passengers, pretending to be traveling salesmen. And at 3 points along the route, more men waited in ambush. As the stagecoach rolled out of Redemption Creek, Eleanor felt a strange sense of completion. Her journey had begun on a stagecoach, fleeing from Marcus's cruelty. Now it would end the same way, but this time, She wasn't running. This time, she was hunting. 20 miles outside town, the attack came exactly as they had predicted. 6 men on horseback thundered down from the hills, guns blazing. The stagecoach driver played his part perfectly, pulling the horses to a stop and raising his hands in surrender. "Step out, Eleanor." Marcus's voice carried clearly over the sound of nervous horses. "Time to finish this once and for all." Eleanor stepped down from the coach, her hands visible and empty. Marcus sat his horse like a conqueror, flanked by his hired guns. But there was something different about him now, something wild and broken that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Marcus," Eleanor said calmly. "You're looking well." "Don't mock me," Marcus snarled. "You destroyed everything I worked for." "I exposed the truth about what you worked for. There's a difference." "The truth?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "The truth is that you're a meddling woman who couldn't mind her own business. And now you're going to pay for it." "I already paid," Eleanor said, touching her scar. "Remember? That was just the beginning." Marcus raised his pistol, but before he could fire, James and the sheriff erupted from the stagecoach boot. The fake passengers drew their own weapons, and suddenly Marcus's men found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. "Drop your weapons!" Sheriff Morrison shouted. The hired guns, seeing which way the wind was blowing, quickly surrendered. But Marcus, consumed by his obsession, refused to give up. "You think you've won?" he screamed at Eleanor. "You think this ends anything? I'll never stop, never." "Yes, you will," Catherine's voice came from behind him. Marcus spun in his saddle to see Catherine riding up with more deputies. Her face was calm but determined. "Catherine," Marcus's voice cracked, "what are you doing here?" "Ensuring justice is served. For Eleanor. For me. For all the women you've hurt." Catherine held up a thick folder. "Testimonies from your other victims, Marcus. Financial records, medical reports. Enough evidence to put you away for the rest of your life." Marcus stared at the folder as if it were a snake. "You don't understand. I love them. All of them." "No," Eleanor said quietly. "You possessed them. You controlled them. You hurt them. That's not love." "Then what is love?" Marcus demanded, genuine confusion in his voice. Eleanor looked at James, at Catherine, at all the people who had risked their lives to help her. "Love is what brought all these people here today. Love is choosing to protect someone even when it's dangerous. Love is seeing someone's flaws and choosing to stay anyway." Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him, faces full of determination and purpose, united in their commitment to justice. For the first time, he seemed to understand that he was truly beaten. "I don't know how to be that kind of person," he said, and for a moment he sounded almost human. "Then learn," Eleanor said. "You'll have plenty of time to think about it in prison." As the deputies led Marcus away, Eleanor felt the last chains of her past finally breaking. She was free not just from Marcus, but from the fear and shame he had tried to make her carry. James put his arm around her waist. "So, Mrs. Crawford, what do you want to do now?" Eleanor smiled, looking out over the vast Kansas prairie stretching toward the horizon. "I want to go home. I want to help other women find their courage. And I want to live every day knowing that I'm exactly where I belong. With me, with you, with our family, with people who understand that sometimes the most beautiful thing about a person is not their perfection, but their scars." As they rode back toward Redemption Creek, Eleanor felt the sun on her face and the wind in her hair. She was Eleanor Crawford now, wife to a good man, friend to the lost and frightened, living proof that it was possible to build something beautiful from the wreckage of the past. Her veil was gone forever, but she had never felt more beautiful in her life.